Now, everyone has complained about their job at some point. Well, not me, obviously. Love my job. Just want to make that clear. But what if parts of your job will change? What if you will be replaced altogether? How would you feel about it? I'm Stefanie Dekker, and welcome to The Street.
What exactly can AI do for you? And now we know kind of what AI will do, but it seems very science fiction-y and kind of scary maybe, and way beyond our capability.
Across the entire world, from Kenyan business owners all the way to Sweden, Norway, the United States, women, who are the red triangles, use AI less than men.
If you're a college-educated man, you're even more excited. You see a future of career opportunity and end up being the people who are building these tools.
Now, did you see that crazy news about they put cats in the Olympics?
Oh no, really?
Yeah, cats.
No, I haven't seen
Yeah,
that.
I'll show you. Look at this.
Oh, what next? Oh, jeez.
Isn't that crazy?
It is, and look how they got him trained.
Now, today we're talking artificial intelligence, your fluency in it, and what it means for your job. Ask yourself this: do you use it? Do your parents use it? Do your kids use it? It can be a huge help, but using it can also be frowned upon. So how are we going to navigate this ever-changing technology at work? And is there a discrepancy in who benefits and who gets overlooked? Well, to help us answer all of these questions, I am joined by Solene Delecourt. She's an assistant professor at the HAAS School of Business at University of California, Berkeley. And we have Pawel, a senior researcher at the International Labour Organization in Geneva. Thank you both very much for joining us. Pawel, I'm going to start with you. So many people are talking about the possibility, the fear of AI taking over their jobs. Do they have a point?
Well, it depends, as usual, which people we're talking about. So we try to understand, actually, in our research at the International Labour Organization, which occupations could potentially be affected and how many people work in them around the world. And to do that, we look at what people do at work, what kind of tasks they perform, and we compare it with the capabilities of this technology. And when you look at it, there's two ways to look at it. One of the statistics that's often quoted is about a quarter of global employment is exposed to an interaction with this technology, which means they might have one or more tasks in their occupation that could, in theory, be performed with AI. And that also means that 3/4 of global employment, according to our estimates, has very little to do with it. So it really matters when we try to distinguish which people worry about it. And then among those 25% of exposed occupations or exposed employment, we estimate that not such a large proportion has the majority of tasks that could be automated fully, which means that would place them at the risk of automating the entire occupation. Majority of jobs consists of tasks where human presence is crucial, and then you have some tasks where you could speed up or maybe totally automate them, depending on the job with these technologies. So we're talking much more about the transformation potential of occupations rather than sort of a job apocalypse, if you will.
Okay, we're going to get into those jobs a little later in the show. Solene, you've also been doing a lot of research into this. I think if you're not using it, if you don't know how to use it, it's a losing battle, certainly when it comes to certain jobs. And interestingly, your research also showed that women are reluctant to use it because they fear of being judged. How would you break down your findings?
Yeah, what we show in our study is that the women are much less likely than men to use generative AI. And that is true across occupations, across ages, across geographies, and even when access to the tool is equalized, we show that women are less likely to use generative AI. And there are a lot of reasons for that. One of them is that maybe women are more worried of being perceived as cheating if they use generative AI.
Now, Pawel, I want to take a look at some of your recent research where you found that 25% of global jobs, you were talking about it there, 1 out of 4, could be transformed by generative AI. And in high-income countries, the number rises to 34%. Now, when it comes to women, their jobs seem to be more affected. 9.6% are predicted to change versus 3.5% of men's jobs. Pawel, Why is that? Why do we see this gender divide even when it comes to jobs?
Yeah, let me try to unpack it a little bit. Well, the number one relationship between AI exposure of occupations and economies is that in poorer countries, there are simply fewer such jobs that have this higher range of exposure, because the jobs that typically have tasks that you could potentially automate with this technology are the office type of jobs, what we call clerical jobs or administrative assistant jobs. And there you have all occupations of the kind, everything from secretarial jobs to admin assistants to data entry clerks. And if you think about the abilities of these technologies, that's exactly where they are quite good. And when you have an occupation where you group a lot of such tasks within an occupation, then you find yourself at the risk of higher automation risk, in theory. And such jobs grow with countries' income. So in wealthy countries, there are simply more such jobs than in poorer countries, and we have that first divide. And then when we look in high-income economies, women are more present in these occupations that I just mentioned, which are typically administrative clerical jobs. And therefore, when you have a technology that could potentially affect this kind of task that these occupations perform, you have this very strong gendered effect, where basically 3 times as the share of women, female employment that could be affected is 3 times the size of the male employment that could be affected in this highest bracket, which is exposed to the risk of automation.
Solene, you've been researching this, but you're also a woman. I'm interested in your personal usage of AI. What is your relationship like with it?
It's interesting. I have been an early user of generative AI. That being said, I have noticed that a lot of people around me who were talking about using generative AI were men. And because I have now written this paper showing that women less, generative AI less, I do feel the pressure personally to use generative AI as much as my male friends and colleagues. It's interesting, one of the findings we have is that women download apps, so women use generative AI less on the browser, but they especially download fewer apps that relate to generative AI. And after we created this figure and we showed the results, I realized, oh wait, I am part of the statistics and I don't have the app on my phone, so I went and downloaded it.
Because it also, we talk about the fear, but it also has a lot of benefits, right, in a way. So it's about being able to use it and understand it. Well, many users online are calling for better access to AI, saying that if you don't know how to use it, it could impact your standing in the workforce. Watch this.
We have to have an AI fluency to move into this next season of technology, this next season of what the world looks like and how it functions. It's not a life or death, but it is the difference between good opportunities that pay well and getting left behind in the workforce. The difference with AI, I know that we're probably all going to agree that it's not going anywhere. But the difference with this, it's not like old technology. It learns as you go along. And so the later you adopt it, the less fluency you'll have. The later you adopt it, the less it's going to know you.
Pawel, she says their AI fluency is important. She also says the less you use it, the less it gets to know you. Now, I find that a little bit of a scary statement, but how would you break that down? Is it good that AI gets to know us? Does it work to our advantage, or are there dangers to that?
Well, maybe let me start with the use by women. I have to say I was a little bit surprised with this comment, and I'm fascinated by Solene's observations, because we recently ran a survey of the employed population in Poland with the National Research Institute there, and we did not see big differences in the use of AI among the employed part of the population when it comes to men and women. What we saw is much bigger differences when it comes to age brackets. So young workers declared using it most frequently. And of course, that relationship, so non-use increases the older the workers. And that is also a similar challenge that was just discussed in this video. That means the less you use it, maybe it's not that the AI gets to know you less, but the lower your fluency with being able to apply these tools in the work context and mix them with the expertise that you have in your job. And that would increasingly become important. And what we know from the previous transitions that concern digital technologies and labor is that older workers were typically at a disadvantage. That was the case when we had computers introduced at work. That was the case of internet, emails, and so on. And here we have, again, this technology where we see this big age-related gap between those who use it and don't use it. But there's a small paradox here, because the latest observations, at least from the US, seem to indicate that the youngest people who are this group who use it the most seem to be also the ones whose jobs might be most affected, because this time, this technology seems to be automating the tasks that typically are performed by junior people. So it's a bit of a paradox when it comes to the frequency of use and at the same time, the potential early negative effects of it on labor.
It's interesting, the age you mentioned, of course, also the older generations, far less digitally literate, because things are also evolving so fast, right? So you're looking at an age divide and, of course, the gender bias, as we've been talking about, and that's being called out by people on TikTok. They say that some of the responses by AI chatbots reflect sexism. Well, take this lady from Australia, for example.
This is in a chat window where I was already talking to ChatGPT about Simone de Beauvoir, who is a feminist philosopher and theorist who studies in this way. And so I asked what phenomenology is, and ChatGPT told me, and it gave me a bunch of examples, and they were all men. And so I said, why leave out Simone de Beauvoir when I ask about phenomenology? This shows a bias towards men. And ChatGPT is like, you're absolutely right. So my next question was, how do I make it clear to you that I want you to value women thinkers as much as men? Is there something I need to ask, that I need to add to my questions? And it was like, thanks for raising this. It's really important. I appreciate you making it explicit. Blah, 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 blah. It said, you don't need to change your questions. Simply asking is enough to remind me of this priority, and I'll approach your requests with greater balance and inclusivity moving forward. If I ever miss the mark, please feel free to point it out. So, okay. And then I said, I shouldn't have to ask you every single time. Like, this should be natural.
Now, talking about ingrained bias, I was doing some research for the show, and according to a report by Carnegie Mellon University, and this is really interesting, they looked at Google Ads, and it was advertising for a high-paid job, coaching job, $200,000 a year. Now, it was advertised to men 1,852 times. It was shown to women only 318 times. Now, that's such surprising figures. Solene, there is a stereotype. Is there a stereotype to the algorithm? Are there biases that are ingrained in it? And is that even possible to change, if so?
Yeah, I have published a paper showing that there are a lot of gender biases online, and these biases exist in text, but they're even stronger in images or other medium. And if you think about what generative AI does, it's taking the existing data and using it to generate answers or output. Now, the data is biased, and what we show in this particular paper is that the data itself is imbalanced. For example, women are portrayed as younger than men, both in images or videos as well as words, and these representations online do not represent the accurate the accurate reality of the world. In fact, they are distorting the world, and there is all of this distortion between age and gender online. And so in a way, when we talk about generative AI being biased, it's using the data that we human have put up online and that we're liking and and clicking on, and as a result it's not surprising that some of the output would be biased.
Pawel, how does that translate to reality? Because we as humans are biased. AI will regenerate itself. So can we even fight this, and will it exacerbate?
Yeah, I think it's important to mention the notion of bias. What we understand in statistics, for example, as bias is that there is the right answer. And you're trying to predict something and you're getting it wrong. You're going above it or below, for example, when you try to predict people's expenses on certain goods. But in reality, in our daily life, we are full of biases as societies. And what is a bias for one person, it might be absolute truth for another. So the question is, when you suddenly start training algorithms on that and applying them to things like the labor market, labor relations, well, you of course will be, just like Solene said, replicating some of those things. But funny enough, to correct some of these things, you might actually need to be introducing a bias to an algorithm, this time a positive bias, for example, if you want to make it less discriminatory against certain groups. And that is basically a process that is infinite. It will never end, just like it will never end in societies. And that is why it's important to have common values and standards. At the ILO, we have a huge range of international labor conventions that apply to the world of work that basically set a common standard on what we agree should be the set of values that we follow. And that is the value of applying those later to these tools, like, for example, now the algorithms, where we can say, okay, that's what we want. We don't want discrimination at work, so we need to keep monitoring how it impacts work. And it's not a one-off. It is basically applying it at the workplace and having people who are affected by it involved in the discussion around it, in the consultation, and continuously checking what is the outcome, and having basically a system that allows to ring the alarm bells, but also that pre-tests certain solutions before they are deployed and they're applied and affect people's and individuals' lives, and basically the work and income, for example.
But common values are great. Monitoring is great, Solene, but how difficult is that when it comes to AI? We know that there are massive challenges when it comes to monitoring, to transparency.
Yeah, I think the first step is awareness, even being aware that these biases exist and they are ingrained both in our minds and in the data that we use online and in the output of generative AI. So having this awareness is the first step. It's, of course, extremely difficult to change the output and to make it less biased, in part because the early users, as my research has shown, the early users have been disproportionately men. And if you think of what tools do generally, is that they will take the preferences of early users and use that to make the tool more tailored for the preferences of the early users. And so even though the gender gap in generative AI seems to be decreasing over time, potentially the harm has already been done in the sense that the early users have disproportionately been men, and the builders, like people who build the tools, are also disproportionately men. So if you think of who works in tech here in Silicon Valley, where I sit, it's a lot of men.
Well, and it's run by men too, isn't it? All our information in the hands of a very few men. Well, of course, not all jobs are created equal when it comes to AI. It can and might transform some jobs, but probably not others. Here's a breakdown. Take a listen. Is your job there?
Let me show you something. Microsoft has just released a report showing which jobs are most endangered by AI and which ones are the safest. And the most endangered 5 jobs: telemarketers, customer service representatives, writers and authors, historians, and the most endangered job: interpreters and translators. They also announced the safest jobs from AI, meaning AI cannot perform these tasks or does not have any meaningful impact. Cement masons and concrete finishers, roofers, dishwashers, phlebotomists, and the most safe job so far is nursing assistant.
Pawel, I'm going to put you on the spot and ask you about a prediction. You've been researching AI moves so fast. I'm going to ask you, what would you say our world is going to look like in, I could say 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, but give me an assessment, considering how fast things are moving when it comes to our job market, how we live, how we work. Let's say 10 years from now, how much is going to change?
10 years is a long timeline for this kind of technologies, because as you can see, we did our first assessment in 2023. And at that time, basically, generative AI was mainly a text processor. It was able to produce text and read text. So the type of jobs that were being affected at them were mostly those clerical administrative jobs that deal with text. of different types, for example, preparing meeting memos or drafting responses to customers. But already 2 years later, we have this technology being able to produce and read image and voice and do it in a multimodal way. So suddenly another range of occupations comes into interaction with it. And we see many more specialized, digitized occupations, just such occupations as web developers or content developers or financial advisors that perform tasks that you could partially automate with this technology because of those increasing abilities. But yet there is this big group of manual jobs that were just listed in this research that was shown in the video. We made a similar list of occupations that are sort of safe from AI for the moment. And on top of that, you will find grave diggers and masons, and you will find animal trappers and a lot of other manual jobs on the way. And then there's everything in between, which is the majority in our assessment of the impact, which is not eliminating jobs entirely, but for example, the nursing job in our assessment is a job that can benefit from this technology a lot. It is actually counted as exposed in our index because it's a job that also has a lot of administrative work. You have to fill out papers, you have to read technical manuals, and automating some of that would allow nurses to spend more time on the core of this job, which is basically nursing human-to-human interaction. So it's really hard to tell, but what we are seeing for the moment, we always focus on what we see the technology being able to do. And for the moment, these are the abilities we see, and that's how they match with the labor market. Whether in 10 years from now we reach much more powerful technologies, well, for now, there is no proof to say that we are anywhere close to there. There's only an expectation. So we stay cautious, and we will be basically more frequently producing assessments as the technology improves and if we see it gaining new capabilities. But let me put it this way, it was impossible to predict also new jobs, and it still is impossible. This technology will create new occupations. And if you think about the idea of predicting influencers before you had social media or web developers before you had internet, that would have been an impossible task. And 10 years from now, that's what we would be trying to do, basically trying to guess what kind of jobs will disappear, but what kind of jobs will also appear with this technology.
Solene, the world is moving so fast. Jobs are going so fast. Of course, AI is being used by a lot of developed and richer countries. How do you see it at some point, even reaching, developing countries? Do you think everyone at some point is going to be affected by AI, or can you still take some distance?
In our study, we look at a range of contexts, including some developing countries, and we have seen this divide in use of generative AI worldwide. That being said, one thing that's important to note with AI is that the majority of it has been trained on the English corpus, or text that comes from the English language. And so for anyone who is using a different language, oftentimes generative AI ends up being less accurate and or less efficient. And so that's an important consideration to note.
Pawel, as a last question, and just quickly as we're running out of time, what advice would you give to people that are worried about their jobs? There's a lot of talk online that the end of in fact, Sam Altman said it himself, right? He said he thought AI was going to lead to the end of the world, but in the meantime, it's going to be amazing. What advice would you give to people that are worried?
Among the people who work around the world, 3.6 billion, we have a very different picture, a little bit what Solene just described. So in high-income countries, of course, it's about ability to work with this technology. We see that people who had it introduced at work, especially in consultation with them, are actually keen to use these tools, use them a lot, and declare that they'd like to use it more. How you approach it, I think, very much depends on where you are located and which kind of occupation you're in. But in general, we know that this technology is also excellent at helping people with lower level skills and less expertise learn from those who know more. It's very good at redistributing knowledge that has been shown in several experiments. So I would encourage people to experiment with it and to use it as a tool that can help you progress so that you can apply it in the context of your work and basically create additional value rather than be sort of left behind in terms of technological skills.
Absolutely. It's about learning to use it because it is here to stay. Solene and Pawel, thank you very much for joining us today. And thank you for being part of the conversation. And I'll see you soon.